Hello there, and then welcome to a brand new video. This is Happy Beyond Numbers, where we learn maths the easy way. Now, in this video, we are looking at class boundary and then class mark. It is important we look at it so that we'll be able to understand and appreciate how to represent data on a histogram, right? So, without much ado, let's quickly go into it. The first thing I would want you to know before we pick an example and learn from it is what an interval is. So, for a class interval, when we talk of a class interval of a group data, a class interval is a group or range used to categorize continuous data into equal weights. So let's say your data is on the marks of students in a class. And you know for examination marks, we use from 0 to 100. But you can't get the data for every mark. So what you are going to do is you are going to group them into intervals. Let's say from 0 to 10, from 11 to 20, from 21 to 30, in that order. You see, that is what we call your grouped data. Now the interval would then be between the highest and then the lowest, right? Now comes what we call the class boundary. You see, if we use an interval of, let's say, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and then what have you. Now, what if you get a value of around 10.5? Where do you put that value? You see, you'll be stacked, you see. Hence, we have the class boundaries. So the class boundaries will remove all this gap. So from 10 to 11, there is a gap. That is 0.1 to 0.9. There is that gap over there. The class boundary removes all those gaps. You see. So if this is an interval, these are class intervals, then our class boundary, we say we need the lower limit or the lower class boundary and then the upper limit or the upper class boundary, as you see over here. And how do we get them? These same intervals we have written over here, that is what will help us get our class boundaries. So it says we should subtract 0.5 from the lower class limit and then add 0.5 to the upper class limit. In so doing, we are going to get, for this, we have 0.0 minus 0.5. And that here will give us a negative 0.5. You see? Then for this one, it says you should add. This here, we have to add. So if we add 0.5 to the 10, we are going to get a 10.5. We do the same for all. So as you can see over here, as I have done, we are just subtracting 0.5 from the lower limit and then adding 0.5 to the upper limit. You see, we would see more of this when we pick an example to explore. Now, the last thing we'll look at is the class mark. Talking of the class mark, it has a formula, right? So we say our class mark is equal to what? The lower limit plus the upper limit all over 2. Once again, the lower limit plus the upper limit all over 2. And we would see examples of all of these when we would work an example. We'll see an explanation of all this when we work an example. So to apply all of this, let's quickly look at an example. So as an example, we have this question here. Now these are what? Samples, right? Data. And then we have to find, or we have to create a frequency table. Then secondly, we have to form class intervals. And then we have to calculate the class boundaries and then the class mark. If you look at this data, we have 45 down to 75. How many times does 45 occur? Just once. 56. All these, they all occur probably just once, you see. So we can't use the normal frequency table we have been using, you see. Hence, we have to group the data together. And that is why we are learning this, all right? So to do that, we first of all need the intervals we want to use. So maybe you want to start from 40 to 50. That would be one interval. Then you come and also get from 51 to what have you, 60 in that order, right? So let me quickly draw a table we'll be using for this data representation. Okay, so here we are. To get this on our frequency table, we need a table of this form. So first of all, we need our class interval here on our first column. Then your tally. Remember when we were doing tally, we are applying that here as well. And then after getting your tally, you get your frequency here. Then your class boundaries, and then your class mark. So the class boundaries and then the class mark are something new here we didn't treat in our previous videos. And moreover, we'll be applying it in learning histograms. So I would really want you to pay attention to what we are doing here. The class interval, looking at our data, the smallest one is what? The 45 over here. So for our interval, we can use from 40 to 50 as our first interval. So then over here, for my first interval, I'm going to write what? 40 to 50. Then my next interval, I'm going to write, to make sure my intervals are all the same, I think I have to use 41 to 50. All right. So 41. Okay, so for my interval, I'm going to use from, let's say, 40 to 49. You see? So from 40 to 49. Then for the next one, we are going to get from 50 to 59. You see? So it continues in that order. Right? So continuing in that order, this is what we have over here. Then we now come to our tally. Right? Then we list out whatever we have over there. So I like to go vertically. All right? So for this first one here, I have 45. So I'll give a stroke which falls within the class interval 40 to 49. So I'll put my stroke over here. Then this one here, 49. So 49 is also within this interval. Then 73 falls here, right? So I'm going to pause, take my time, and then do this quickly. You can also pause as well and then do it and compare to what I am getting here. Okay, so this here is what I've got for my tally, right? And I do hope you also you got the same as well. Now we come to our frequency. So for the interval 40 to 49, I had 3. So there are 3 of them. Then 50 to 59, we have 6. 60 to 69, that gives us 5, 6, 7. So there's a 7. Then 70 to 79, we have another 6. 80 to 89, that gives us a 5. Then 90 to 100, I just had 3. So at this stage, we have our class interval, our tally, the frequency. Now we want our class boundary. So as I said earlier on in our previous page, we said if you want the class boundary, all you need to do is to subtract 0.5 from the lower class limit and then add 0.5 to the upper class limit. What do we mean by that? So if you look at what we have here as our class intervals, these here, the multiples of 10s, they are lower class limits. So for this interval, 40 to 49, this one is lower. Hence, this is our lower class limit, and this becomes our upper class limit. So for all the lowest, we are going to subtract 0.5. You see? So let's quickly do that. That is 40 minus 0.5. That gives us 39.5. You see? So we have our 39.5. Then 50 minus 0.5. That also gives us 49.5. You see? So we can continue, or we have 59.5 over here. If you have to follow the same procedure, this is what you are going to get for all of them, right? So we bring our intervals. And then now we want the upper class limit for all of them. Sorry, the upper class boundary. Right? And our instruction says for those that we have here, what do? We add 0.5. So it means for 49, we are going to add 0.5. 49 plus 0.5, that gives us a 49.5. You see? Then we come to 59. 59 plus 0.5, that gives us 59.5. So you realize that it's just these ones that you are writing in what the previous ones. So it simply means I'm going to get a 69.5 here. I'm going to get a 79.5 here and 89.5 here, right? Then the last one, which is a 99.5. So we have 99.5 over here. Now, if you have been able to follow through with this, then I'll say you have done really well. So the last thing we want to do is to get our class mark. And how do we get our class mark? Our class mark, as we said earlier on, the formula is what? The lower limit plus the upper limit divided by 2. If you do the first one, you would easily be able to tell what the answer to the remaining ones are, right? So for this very first one, the first one here, our class mark for our first class boundary, the class mark. So the first one is going to give us a 39. That is our lower class limit plus the upper class limit. So a 39.5 plus 49.5, and then we divide by 2. And that gives us 39.5 plus 49.5 gives us, let me say, 89. So 89 divided by 2. 89 divided by 2 gives us a 44.5. So our class mark for the first class boundary is going to be a 44.5. Let's do for the second one, and then you see the pattern. If you are able to identify the pattern, you just follow in that order, and then there will be no need to calculate. So for the second one, you're going to get a 49.5 plus a 59.5. That is the lower plus the upper divided by 2. If we add that, we are going to get a 109 divided by 2. And that gives us a 54.5. Do you see any pattern yet? The second one is giving us a 54.5. So it simply means the next one is going to give us a 64.5, 74.5, 84.5, and then 94.5. And that is it. You have been able to construct your frequency table for this grouped data, right? So how did we do it? Let's go over it again. You have your data. This isn't just any data, but then you have to what? Group them. And in grouping them, we said we want to group them from 40 to 49, 50 to 59, in that order, all the way to what? 100, right? Now from our data, our raw data, we get our tally. Assuming we didn't have a raw data and then this part of the table was given to us, then we could have just quickly gone to our frequency. So now that we have our tally, that gives us our frequency, we look for our class boundaries. And how do we get our class boundaries? We subtract 0.5 from the lower limit and then 0.5 to the upper one, right? So as you can see, it's all of this minus 0.5 giving us this. Then all of this plus 0.5 giving us this. Then our class mark, we find the sum of this lower and this upper, and then we divide it by 2, as simple as it is. This is how beyond numbers where we learn maths the easy way. If there's anything you don't understand, you can let me know at the comment section. In the next slide, I'll write down some questions. You can also try on your own to test your understanding. If this is your first time, you can always choose to like and then subscribe. So anytime I release a video, you'll be notified as well. Thank you and then stay blessed. Here you have your question for trial.